In December 1872, a ship was found drifting alone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Her sails were still set, her cargo sat untouched, and the crew's belongings lay exactly where they had left them. But every soul aboard had vanished without a trace. She was the Mary Celeste, and she would become the most famous ghost ship in all of history. More than 150 years later, we still do not truly know what happened to the people on board. It happened far out in the open Atlantic, hundreds of miles from the nearest land, off the islands of the Azores. On the 4th of December, the crew of another ship, the Dei Gratia, spotted a vessel moving strangely on the horizon, far from any normal shipping lane. She was yawing back and forth, her sails torn and only half set, drifting off her course. For 2 hours the Dei Gratia signaled to her, but no one ever answered, and no one stood at her wheel. At last, the men lowered a small boat and rowed across the heavy swell to investigate. When they climbed aboard, they found the Mary Celeste completely deserted. They called out again and again, but only the wind and the creaking timbers answered. There was not a single soul anywhere on the ship. And yet she was in good order, still seaworthy, sailing herself quietly across the ocean. Below deck, it looked as though the crew had stepped away only moments before. A month earlier, on a clear November morning, the Mary Celeste had set sail from New York, bound for the distant port of Genoa in Italy. In her hold, she carried 1,700 barrels of raw industrial alcohol, packed tightly together in the dark. It was a dangerous cargo, but a perfectly ordinary one for a merchant ship of her day. Her captain was Captain Briggs, a sober, deeply religious and highly experienced seaman. He was known as a careful man who never took foolish risks at sea. He had brought along his wife, Sarah, and their little daughter, Sophia, who was only 2 years old, for the long voyage across the sea. Together with a crew of 7 trusted sailors, 10 people in all set out across the Atlantic. It should have been a routine crossing. Briggs had sailed these very waters safely many times before, and nothing suggested that this voyage would be any different. But when the boarding party searched the silent ship from bow to stern, what they found made no sense at all. Everything was wrong, in the strangest possible way. The crew's personal belongings were all still there. Their clothes, their pipes, even their money left completely untouched. There was more than 6 months of food and fresh water still sitting in the stores. In the captain's cabin, his family's things lay just where they had left them, right down to the little girl's toys, sitting untouched on the floor. The very last entry in the ship's logbook was dated 10 days before she was ever found. And then, one by one, the stranger clues began to surface. One of the heavy hatches over the cargo hold had been pried open, its cover thrown carelessly aside on the deck. About 3 feet of water was sloshing in the bottom of the ship. It was strange, but she was in no real danger of sinking, and her pumps still worked perfectly well. The ship's compass had been smashed. A long rope hung frayed over the stern, trailing loose in the water, and the ship's only lifeboat was gone. It was clear now. For some reason, all 10 people, the captain, his family, and every last sailor, had climbed into that small lifeboat and abandoned a perfectly good ship. Why would a careful, experienced captain abandon a seaworthy vessel, with his own wife and little child aboard, in the middle of the open ocean? The investigators searched the entire ship for any sign of violence. They found absolutely none. Nothing had been stolen. The valuable cargo and even the crew's money were all still aboard. It was not pirates. It was not mutiny. There was no storm and there was no fire. So what could possibly have driven 10 people off a sound ship in such a desperate hurry? The answer may lie in the cargo itself. Those 1,700 barrels of raw alcohol. When the barrels were finally unloaded, 9 of them were found completely empty. They had leaked. In the warm, sealed hold, that leaking alcohol would have filled the ship with invisible, explosive fumes. Many believe that a sudden rumble from below, or the sharp reek of alcohol, convinced Briggs that the ship was about to blow apart. Modern experiments have shown that such fumes can erupt in a wave of flame and pressure, leaving behind no fire and no scorch marks at all. Terrified, Briggs may have rushed everyone into the lifeboat to wait at a safe distance until the danger had passed. To keep from losing his ship, he tied the little boat to the Mary Celeste with a long rope, and they waded out on the water. But the explosion never came. The fumes slowly cleared, and the ship sat quietly on the water. And then the unthinkable happened. A gust of wind filled the ship's sails. A sudden swell pulled the two boats apart, and the frayed rope snapped. The Mary Celeste surged forward and sailed away, empty, leaving the lifeboat far behind. 10 people sat helpless in a tiny open boat, watching their only refuge shrink into the distance. Out there with no sail, little water, and no land for hundreds of miles in any direction, the 10 of them simply disappeared into the sea. The Mary Celeste sailed on alone for days across the empty ocean, until the day Gracia found her drifting, still carrying her terrible secret. No bodies were ever recovered. No lifeboat was ever found. The captain, his wife, his little girl, and all of his crew were gone forever. The leaking fumes are the best explanation we have, but no one will ever know for certain. The truth sailed away in a small wooden boat and sank with the people who lived it. So what do you think really happened aboard the Mary Celeste? A captain's deadly mistake, or something stranger we still cannot explain? Tell us your theory in the comments below.